Hello, and welcome to our session on home dialysis therapies. I'm Carrie Thibodeau, and I'm the National Director of Programs and Public Policy. I'll be moderating the session. We're very excited to have you join us today for an informative discussion on the rewards and the challenges of home dialysis therapies. Before we begin, I'd like to review with you how to participate. We're offering all forum sessions bilingually using simultaneous interpretation. During the session, our speakers will present in French. To hear the presentation in English, click the interpretation icon, which looks like a globe in the Zoom toolbar below this video, and select English. We ask that you enter any questions you may have throughout the session into the Q&A pane below the video. We'll collect your questions, and then at the end of the presentation, the speakers will address as many as they can. You'll also have an opportunity during the Q&A period to ask questions live as time permits. Please feel free to send any other questions to kidneyprograms@kidney.ca. For general comments during the session, there's a Feedloop chat box at the right side of your screen. Please avoid using the chat box for questions. They need to be submitted through the Q&A pane to be seen and addressed by the speakers. The information shared in this session is not intended to be medical advice. We recommend that you speak to your doctor about your own individual situation.
I would like now to introduce to you Mrs. Joanie Saint-Jean, working as an administrative officer during her studies in 2006 at CIUS de l'Est de l'île de Montréal. Joanie started out in hemodialysis. She then fell in love with the sector, and it was the hemodialysis clientele that made her decide to start studying nursing. Graduating from the University of Montreal in 2011 with a Bachelor of Science in Nursing, she began her career in nephrology in 2012 after having previously worked in pulmonology, thoracic surgery, vascular surgery, and hemato-oncology. Seeing her passion for teaching new users, she was soon approached to work in home dialysis in 2013. It was then that she really felt she belonged. Joanie really she has since twice taken part in expert committees on home dialysis, hemodialysis. She has been a preceptor for students at Université de Montréal on several occasions, and she has developed several projects in collaboration with her team. She also has received many awards for her work, and she's an internationally renowned conference speaker. And she is since January 2024, she is an immediate senior clinical nurse assistant for autonomous renal replacement. So Joanie, the floor is yours. Hello, everyone. It's really a great pleasure for me to be with you today. So I will start my presentation on autonomous modes. So home dialysis. So the objective, the goal of my presentation is to promote awareness of the different modes, autonomous renal replacement, peritoneal dialysis, and home hemodialysis. And I would like to talk about the benefits of each and raise awareness of potential complications. What do you know about hospital hemodialysis? It is a life-saving treatment. Chronic kidney disease patients must go to the hospital 3 times a week for 4 hours to receive their treatment. And hemodialysis filters blood, removes liquid by ultrafiltration. So we remove the liquid, and it's effective when combined with medication and a strict diet. So we are talking here about 12-hour a week of dialysis as the minimum required for the survival of CKD patients. So we're not talking about quality of life. So the general objectives of home dialysis is really to improve the quality of life and life expectancy of renal replacement patients, We want to increase the dialysis time, so a person with healthy kidneys is dialyzed or filtered 24/7. At the center, minimum survival requirement 12-hour a week, 3 times 4 hours, so 4 times a week, 3 times a week. So, and peritoneal dialysis allows 24-hour dialysis, and home hemodialysis allows treatment every 2 days at night safely for 8 hours per treatment. So we triple the dialysis time. The more we have dialysis, the better. So these are optimal treatments for people with kidney failure. So now peritoneal dialysis. What's nice with this technique is simple and it's easy to learn. It's done at home. We use the peritoneum, the body's natural membrane found in the abdominal cavity, to eliminate waste, excess water, and salt. We put a small flexible plastic tube, it's called the peritoneal dialysis catheter, is placed through the abdominal wall. So it's like a 24-hour dialysis. So here you can see it is, we call it the swan neck spiral. So we need to be in operating room to use this catheter. So the spiral part that we see, it's in the abdominal cavity. So this is what is coming out of the belly. So the peritoneal cavity, we see the dialysis solution that's connected to the catheter the, of peritoneal dialysis. So it's in the cavity. And we see the exchanges with the liquids that's being drained and filtered. There is a period where the liquid is 4 to 6 hours and exchanges are being done between the peritoneal and the abdominal cavity. As I was saying, the abdominal cavity is emptied and refilled 4 times a day with an exchange solution in which waste accumulates. So we go from the more concentrated to less concentrated. So the solution is drained and refilled in less than 30 minutes. So during this time, you can do activities such as watching TV, reading, eating. No, we cannot go and do sports, but we can do some of our daily activities. Dialysis can be performed manually or using an automated device called a cycler. So the three phases, the three stages, we start with drainage. So we drain the liquid that's the abdominal cavity. It takes 10 to 20 minutes. Once this has been done, there's the stage of infusion, and it lasts about 5 to 10 minutes. And we put the solution in the abdominal cavity, and then there's a stasis or equilibration phase, and it lasts 4 to 6 hours during the day and 8 to 10 hours at night. So it's important to have a minimum amount of time where the solution stays in the abdominal cavity so exchanges may happen. So there are two types of peritoneal dialysis. There is one called manual exchange, and the user does the irrigation and drainage, so morning, noon, supper, and bedtime. And then the one we called automated peritoneal dialysis with a cycling device. And this is a night swap. And what's nice with this is that several possible exchanges are possible. So the advantages of peritoneal dialysis, it's an improved quality of life. Like I mentioned at the beginning, it's an out of hospital treatment. Less time is wasted on travel as with hospital hemodialysis. There is a possibility of modifying your dialysis schedule in part to suit your activities, and the treatment equipment is transportable. So we can, it can be taken on the road, so we can travel. And it allows a more liberal diet than a hospital hemodialysis. We have here an example of a patient who is doing peritoneal dialysis at home, and we see the material that we need for 1 month in peritoneal dialysis. So this is what we need as far as equipment. Now, other facts about peritoneal dialysis. It prevents accumulation of waste and liquids, better tolerated, it's also better tolerated, sorry, by the body, therefore a better choice for preserving the heart and blood vessels. No needles, that's a big advantage for many of our patients. No external blood circulation, so preserved blood vessels, unlike hemodialysis, less exposure to hospital-acquired bacteria viruses, a better stability and control of blood pressures, preservation of residual renal function. We can urinate longer and less liquid long term. For diabetic people who have diabetes, blood sugar levels are often more stable, so insulin can be injected into the dialysis solution, so no subcutaneous injections are required. And for informed and free choice, we need to know what are the possible complications in peritoneal dialysis. It's the fact that the peritoneum is a medium without white blood cells. So aspasia, so its sterility maintenance is essential. So we really need to wash our hands really well. Why? Because there is a risk of peritonitis, so infection of the peritoneum. And also some complications like local complications, leakage of dialysis solution through outlet, edema. There can be also nutritional and metabolic complications, alteration of the peritoneal membrane. Now I will talk about home hemodialysis and its advantages. So it's improved treatment tolerance. It's a much smoother dialysis than in hospital. And it's by losing fluid over a long period. This avoids pressure drops, cramps, and the fatigue felt after 4-hour dialysis sessions in center. We also have an increased general well-being. So by being dialyzed for longer, as I said earlier, we talk about 8 to 10 hours and more often. So 7 dialysis per 15 days. So we observe an increase in our patients' energy, concentration, and tolerance to effort. So waste will decrease slightly. So it's as if kidney function were improving. People all sometimes feel as though they had had a transplant. Also, less destruction of hemoglobin by waste products as the patient is dialyzed more often. And we feel less, anemia than in center. Other benefits, we have a reduced dietary restriction and medication. Of course, we need to respect a certain diet, but we are less limited as far as liquids, potassium, and phosphorus. So I'll talk a little bit about phosphorus. Phosphorus is a particle that takes a minimum of 4 hours to be dialyzed. In a center, in 4 hours, it's almost not dialyzed. So we need uh, sedators of phosphorus. It can be Neragel, others. But when we do 8 hours, the phosphorus is dialyzed. So I will tell you a little story that I tell my patients very often. I start with calcium. Calcium, I ask them what is it good for or what does it serve? And people will say usually that it's for the bones, but actually calcium has also a more of a vital role. It's really serves the heartbeat. So calcium is really a priority for our heart. And also there is a vitamin D, activated vitamin D. We talk about this often. When we have a kidney problem, we have a problem with vitamin D being activated because that's what kidney do. So vitamin D helps with absorption of calcium. If you eat a lot of calcium, but you don't have activated vitamin D, unfortunately, the calcium that you eat in food is not absorbed by your body. So we see what pattern emerges. So we have a calcium problem. We have a activated non-activated vitamin D problem, so less calcium is absorbed, and we need calcium for our heartbeat. So phosphor comes into play here. When phosphorus is too high in our body, uh, so it phosphorus is married, is being mingled with the calcium, which is a problem. So that's why we often restrain people as far as phosphorus is concerned. And one of the reasons why this is one of the reasons why we do this. So there's a gland looking for calcium everywhere. So where will it find it? In bones, in your bones. So we're talking about a risk of fracture in the long term. So we can see the problem high phosphorus level can induce. And as though this were not enough, we also have the fact that phosphorus and calcium being mingled together actually de- de- deposit it themselves on the vessels. And so if it comes on the vessels, then vessels become really, really hard, and we call them calcified vessels, and it can sometimes hinder potential kidney transplant. So we can see here that the benefits of home hemodialysis is really good as far as phosphorus is concerned, because we really solve these problems with it. Of course, at the hospital, we always look at blood analysis, blood tests, and very often home hemodialysis, we can reduce the medication. So we have another example. It's a simulation of 8 hours. We can see here that the patient had a phosphorus that was 2.04, and we can see that at some point the patient was we can see that the 8-hour dialysis is really very efficient. The other advantage, and I have talked about it a little bit with phosphorus, we reduce the risk of cardiovascular and bone disease. So this is enhancing, controlling hypertension, phosphorus control, bone problems will diminish. And also we improve, as I said, the control of hypertension and phosphorus, as I was saying. And so there's less waste in the blood, so we can hope to reduce the risk of artery disease and prolongs life compared to hospital dialysis. And also the same as peritoneal dialysis, we have more free time during the day because dialysis is at night. The return to work and study will be easier. Work-life balance is also easier because you have the control on when you plug yourself or not. There's less risk of contracting a nosocomial infection, better quality of life, and more flexibility in our schedules. So, of course, one of the constraints of home dialysis is the installation. So, what you need to know, especially in Quebec, is patients do not have to move within a year as the installation is paid for by the RAMQ. If you're a tenant, the permission must be obtained from the landlord to carry out the work. The installation consists of what? Addition of 2 circuit breakers in the home's electric box. We also add 2 dedicated outlets for the appliance and its 15 ampere water system. And we add a cold water inlet similar to that of a washing machine. Here I have some examples of pictures. Most of my patients of a furniture here that they can use with they can with all that's necessary for the treatments. We also have water detectors, so we don't have a leakage, and we have the water entryway that I will show in the next, and we have the two 15 amperes. So we see here the water entry. It takes about an hour or two to uninstall this after a transplant, for instance. It's usually a link to a drain that's in the home. Here, I had an example of a patient who had a pretty small room, 10 feet by 10 feet. So what the patient did here, so he they liberated the wardrobe to put uh, the equipment. So when there was a treatment, he would pull out the equipment. So complications are pretty rare when you do this at home. And this is an example of a material for 1 month. So we have ultra filter that protects from bacteria. So we also have a fistule here. And this is an artery that's linked to a vein to increase a vein so we can do hemodialysis. This is done through surgery. And we also have detectors of blood leakage. This is at the end of the needle. So if the needle comes out, then there's an alarm coming uh, starting, and it protects you during the night. So this is a detector here in the needles. And another thing that we see in hemodialysis is the central catheter. There are devices, security devices, and you can see we want to really retain the tube very well so it stays in place during treatment. So the training, patient training lasts 3-4 months. So there are a lot of safety pre-connection checklist. There are ensuring safety devices to be installed. Complication during dialysis there are a lot. We can have blood pressure drops, cramps, dehydration, overload, blood leakage, fire, panic, danger to life, etc. But you need to know that during the training, we explain to you all the actions that have to be done. Well, for us at Maisonneuve-Rosemont, there's always nurses available 24/7, even during the night. By phone, you can call them. So our philosophy in autonomous mode is the patient partner. And for me, this is really important. It's the patients that help us go forward, really to improve our program and to really improve the quality of healthcare. And we also want to avoid preconceived ideas about users' limitations and the impossibility of home treatment. I had a a patient who was visually impaired, and he went to find all the tools with the ENFB, the Nazareth Institute for the Blind, and he started this innovative project, and he could become autonomous in 100% autonomous. So these are really, really nice stories and successes that we like to share. So if there's a key takeaway this afternoon, it's that motivation is the driving force behind innovation. Perseverance pays off. And most of all, communication is the key to success. User-nurse relationship is paramount. And don't hesitate to use available resources. So that's all I wanted to share with you today. Thank you very much for sharing your expertise and for helping us understand the different treatment options. Thank you very much. Mr. Sumitrana, I would like you to introduce yourself and talk about your experiences. Yes, hello everyone. My name is Sumitra Mir. I'm 49 years old. I started dialysis at home in April 2021. I dialyzed about 2 years after having received a double transplant of pancreas and kidney at the CHUM, the Montreal hospital. So it's been 9 months and it's going very well. Everything is in order and I still follow the CHUM program. And this will go on for 15 months. And then there will be another schedule for me. After 15 months, they will examine me not every 2 weeks or every month. It will be every 6 months or every year after 15 months of regular follow-ups. And then what I wanted to talk about is the home dialysis with the team at the Rosemont Hospital and also the training and the autonomy. First of all, the training for myself lasted 2 months, but it took 4 months for me because I didn't want to go home because I was feeling very well over there. There was a very good team following us and always there for us. And for dialysis, Joanie talked about the advantages and benefits. One of the main benefits for me is really as far as schedule. We are autonomous, and to be autonomous, we do what nurses ask us to do. Everything is really looked after. I don't really have any problems. Maybe it happened once at the beginning. There was an outage, an electricity outage. You plug everything, and then the electricity goes off. So then I called, and they said, "Well, do what you can do. Disconnect yourself 15 minutes." And we do dialysis when electricity comes back. So I think it's pretty simple and we don't panic. So I think I can say we have a very good service. It's a very tight follow-up and we're not too worried. And the advantages, as Joanie said, we have a good dialysis, 8-10 hours per dialysis, and we are in better shape. Our quality of life is better, and we are more free. And it allows me also to have good energy for a double transplant because not everybody can do a double transplant. I was lucky that I could do this, but it was thanks to the home dialysis that I could have all the energy to be ready for the transplant and have a successful transplant. So this is what I wanted to say as far as my case. And as far as transplant, it's been 9 months in my case. And autonomy. Autonomy, I really recommend this to everybody doing dialysis at home. to avoid as many possible as possible, you have to be up to date, and you have to be autonomous as well, and you have to really follow all the rules and requests, and you have problems, you can communicate with them and share your knowledge also in your experience, because everybody has a different body and reacts differently.
These are all the advantages. And also, they spoke about the home team. Of course, there are many teams at the center, but me, I'm at home. So it's a small group, but really everybody, they're there for you. It's like home away from home, a family. I've even met patients that are very kind. There are many of them. So you can make friends that way. You can get to better know people, and you can even have a bit of fun. Well, of course, we take this very seriously, but still we try to be comfortable when we go there. And if you want to talk about something, we're not too timid, and we're not intimidated by this. So people are very open, and we have to take the responsibility of getting the care we need, and they're there for us. And what else did I want to talk about also? Well, in my case, relatively easy, quote unquote, for me. It wasn't too complicated. I was lucky after only almost 2 years of dialysis. I got the transplant, but the transplant was so far a success for me. And it's like a second life for me, a second chance which begins. And now I'm very satisfied with the result. And I will continue, if I can, like today, share my life's experiences, talk about what I've learned, and maybe give a bit of advice. And if there are any questions that you want to ask me, I'll be ready for that. That would be all for me. Much, Sumitra, for having shared your experiences of home dialysis. Thank you. Now I have the pleasure of introducing Lisa Shimuzo. She was an only child. Her friends were always very important in her life. So Lisa was always a very social person. So unsurprisingly, Luisa Guinozo chose something which allowed her to have a direct contact with people by becoming a specialized education technician. She had the pleasure of working with many clientele, but it's mostly troubled teenagers who are dear to her heart, and she obtained a position in the secondary school as as worker. Lisa was found an extraordinary husband and having two beautiful children who are her greatest pride. Her life had been perfect until the 15th of April 2021, when she received her diagnosis of chronic kidney disease after a self-immune disease. So it was like the roller coaster for her that started at that moment. So she tried to slow down the progression of the disease using peritoneal dialysis, and she tried to find a living donor. She finally was lucky to get a transplant on this past 11th of January. The Kidney Foundation of Canada was there for her during this whole journey. And Lisa wants to pay forward, give to the following by sharing her story in order to support the new patients. So Lisa Guinoiseau, I leave you the floor. Good day, all. So I'm very happy to be with you this afternoon to talk a bit about my journey with peritoneal dialysis. Well, now it's behind me because, as it was said, I've just been transplanted at the CHUM, me too, this past 11th of January, thanks to, a friend who accepted to give her kidney so I could receive one. And me too, I'm doing fine. I myself am surprised to see how much things are getting better quickly. So I consider myself to be very lucky. So also, as it was said in the introduction, my journey started very suddenly when I was 37 years old. I went to a routine visit to the doctor, and they saw something was not going well in my urine test. So they did more bigger workup, and the diagnosis came down. I had a nephropathy at IG. And when it was discovered, well, my kidneys were at 22%. So right away, they started talking about dialysis. It's a word I did not want to hear at 37 years of age, a bit like anybody who has to go through dialysis. Me, in the beginning, I wanted to try to stay away as long as possible from a transplant. I wanted to avoid it, dialysis. But my team, I was being followed at the Verdun Hospital, and my team explained that the longer you wait before dialysis, the earlier you start dialysis, it would be easier for my body to accept it. So since I didn't have to start dialysis as an emergency, I was able to get informed on all types of dialyses. And as it was said, since I have two children, young children, for me, it was far preferable to do peritoneal dialysis because I didn't see myself, leaving 3 times a week from the home and going to the hospital for the long treatments. So it was simpler for me to do at home a dialysis. Now, concerning the training, well, me too. On my side, things went very well. Well, at the Verdun Hospital, I was twinned with a nurse from peritoneal dialysis who taught me the operations of this treatment, how you manage peritoneal dialysis at home. It wasn't, well, it was not as long as home hemodialysis. For me, it lasted about 3 weeks to a month. There I learned the various techniques, manual techniques first, and I started 1 to 2 exchanges per day for manual dialysis treatments. So I was doing one in the morning, beginning, and one in the evening before going to bed. And I kept liquid all night inside my abdomen, and then I would empty it in the morning. Then, of course, my renal function continued going down, so they had to increase the exchanges. When we arrived at 4 exchanges per day, that's when quickly my dialysis nurse proposed to go on the cycling machine. So I accepted because one of the advantages was to have days where I didn't have to do any exchanges of dialysis treatments during the day. So for me, it was a big advantage to learn to do it during the night. So I went back to school, quote unquote, with my nurse to learn this new machine, which I didn't know at all. This lasted about 2 to 3 weeks, I would say, the learning process. And afterward, well, it started to ship the whole material, the cycler and all the boxes. This was kind of a shock when I saw all the boxes arriving the first time. Don't forget that it's about 30 large boxes, so it's quite striking. But well, you find ways of putting them in the house. And well, actually, I think like everybody, when you start peritoneal dialysis on the cycler, it requires a lot of adaptation. In the beginning, I thought it was difficult to be connected on the machine, and the feelings that I had in my abdomen also with the machine, I didn't control them. So in the beginning, during the drainage, I thought it would hurt a bit. So I needed to have a good communication with my dialysis team so that we could find the right settings, so that the cycler, the good operating mode, so that the cycler would give a good dialysis and that I wouldn't feel any pain. And also what I thought, the noises in the cycler at night, there were many noises. You end up getting used to it, but in the beginning, my sleep patterns were disrupted. It took me about 3 months to get used. And honestly, I was a bit discouraged. I figured, oh, well, I think I'll go back into the manual because it's simpler. But once again, thanks to communication and to the wonderful team that I had with my peritoneal nurse peritoneal dialysis nurse, she always encouraged me to continue with the cycler, telling me that sometimes some patients, it could take up to 6 months, but she promised me that, if I really stuck with it, I would never want to change. I would like to stay with this way of doing dialysis at night with the cycler. And she was right. Actually, she was right. When my body finally got used to the cycler, I didn't want to change anymore because I appreciated to have, days where I didn't have to think about coming home early to do a dialysis or whatever. Also, what I found excellent is that the company which supplied the medical equipment, they were very available 24 hours a day. If there was a problem with my machine, the cycler, I could call them, and they always tried to help me. It happened a few times that I had to change cyclers because, well, there was a big technical problem, which meant that I couldn't do my dialyses at night. But then what I would do is the next day, I would do manual exchanges. So it wasn't that bad. And the company, they're very attentive. If there's a problem with the cycler, in less than 24 hours the next day, I would receive a new one. So I didn't have to stay long with the manual dialysis. The next evening, I could connect to my new cycler and thing would go well. So really for me, I thought it was excellent. Their service. Now for the nurse, well, of course, in peritoneal dialysis, you don't necessarily have access to a nurse at night. Normally, there are no problems. You don't really need to absolutely talk to a nurse at night. Otherwise, during the day, if I had a question, I would call directly at the hospital, and my nurse would always call me back, or she would pick up the phone and answer right away. So we had excellent support. As I said, also, you need to plan. You do peritoneal dialysis, as it was explained, because you really need a room where you can prepare your dialysis bags. You need a space that you can also keep very clean. As Joanie explained, you have to be very careful with infections. So hand hygiene all the time. You have to be very careful with hand sanitation. Personally, even I was lucky enough, my spouse installed a sink in my own room, so I didn't have to leave the room to wash my hands. I could do this directly in my room and then install my machine and connect myself. So things went very well. I didn't have any peritonitis or infection. I was always very rigorous with this hand sanitation, so on. So I'm happy. And also, I was told that if you had a peritonitis, most of the time you needed to call quickly the hospital, and then they were able to give us antibiotics, so that would be eliminated quickly. So it's something that can be treated fairly well. Now, for the advantages, well, for me, peritoneal dialysis was for the traveling and trips. Personally, I never traveled outside the country. Well, yes, once I went to the States, but it's just for a weekend. So a long trip outside the country, I didn't do it, but it's something which is quite simple in the sense that you need preparation. You have to communicate minimally you have to plan 3 months ahead of time with your medical supplies company, and they can make sure that they will deliver the boxes for the dialysis that we will need in the location where we will be. So it avoids carrying 20 boxes with us if ever you leave. It's not always easy to carry all these boxes. But as I explained, I went on trips on cottages, and of course I would need to bring my boxes and my machine. So it's preparation, but I think that you mustn't prevent yourself from doing it because mental health, from the point of view of mental health, it's always good to leave your routine and travel a bit, and that's a big advantage. So briefly, that's about it. Personally, me starting dialysis, as I said at the beginning, this worried me enormously, but I realized that as a human being, we have a capacity to adapt ourselves, which is quite surprising. And when we are well supported and that we have a good team behind us, care team. They're there to reassure us and help us. Well, we really learn to trust. And we kind of become experts for our own home treatments. So for me, well, I was well supported, so I appreciated this a lot. So yes, obviously dialysis, we've seen it. It's a treatment which is very burdensome, but you have to keep in mind that this is what keeps us alive while we wait for a transplant. So personally, I was about a year and a half in peritoneal dialysis until my transplant. And obviously, I don't regret my choice. I'm glad I chose that. So there it is. Thank you, Lisa, for sharing your experience. We're delighted that you received a transplant, a kidney transplant, and that you're doing so well. So finally, I'd like to present Mr. Normand Lefebvre. Normand is a patient of 80 years of age. He's retired and he has chronic kidney disease, and he's followed in nephrology since 2004, and he's diagnosed as a diabetic since 2005. Despite a rigorous monthly follow-up, colorectal cancer and radiotherapy and chemotherapy in 2015 and 16 will provoke the total cessation of the kidney function. So for the past 5 years, he had a fistula in the left arm, and we taught him how to do self-dialysis at home. So 8 hours every 2 days at night. And he also changed his diet. And every month he meets his nephrologist, his nutritionist, and the clinical team. It's as if his kidneys were back to normal. Normand, I leave the floor. So good evening, all. It's a bit difficult to talk after having heard such wonderful testimonials before me because they said everything that I wanted to say. So to summarize, I've been on dialysis since 2019. I was taught right from the start. Maybe I did 2 weeks with dialysis at the hospital 3 times a week, 4 hours. And right away, I was told, you're a candidate for home dialysis. And in my case, it's rather a fistula. So on the arm here, I had a fistula. It's kind of a catheter that connects a vein and an artery to have a sufficient blood flow so that when the blood leaves our body, goes into the machine, it gets cleaned up and comes back by another entrance. So I was taught this. It took me a long time to learn, not because it was a bit difficult at the beginning, because I have a venous system which is troublesome. My veins are small and they meander around. They're not nice, big, straight veins. So at the very beginning, there were often complications, but I was so well supported by the dialysis team of Maison d'Homme Rosemont that I persisted. Now I reap all of the advantages. In other words, for the past few years, now I can really do the dialysis every 2 days during 8 hours, every 2 days. And I think, in other words, up to a certain point, it's almost unconscious since I do this at night. So at 8 in the evening, 8, 9, I start to prepare myself. And from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., my dialysis is done in an automatic way. And I consider, with the results I've received in nephrology and also from the multidisciplinary team, so once again, I went today, well, my results make me see that basically my renal function is almost normal. In other words, it's a bit as if my kidneys came back and they work normally. So it's quite an advantage compared to, as Joanie said, dialyses, which are not really good, or we have to have a very strict diet with medication, many medication to be able to survive. Since being 4 times a week, 4 hours at the hospital with the traveling, which requires a lot of time, it's a lot less effective. So in my case now, I'm very satisfied. And as mayor and the other participant, Lisa, we've had a team of clinicians, I repeat, teams with which we were partners. It was really interactive. We learned from all the participants. We, the patients, we learned to constantly interact with one and the other and so on. And the explanation, the instructions we received from the others allowed us to better adapt ourselves and understand the techniques. There are many techniques for home hemodialysis, a fistula. There's always a question of being, avoiding the germs and keeping everything sanitized to avoid infections. So you have to be very rigorous with cleanliness and hand washing and so on. So up to a certain point, you have to be able to be comfortable with, kind of the computer, the machine that is loaned to it. And as Mayor said, there's also the whole management of all the material. Every month you receive for 28 days of supplies. So you have to learn to classify this. It's kind of like a stockroom manager, so to speak. So you need to learn new roles. And up to a certain point, you end up by learning new lessons every day. And eventually you control the environment for dialysis. And in most of the cases that I've seen anyway, things go very well and people are satisfied and people find back energy. They have a lot of self-sufficiency and more energy thanks to this technique. But you still have to say, I now want to take charge of my life rather than being taken care of by somebody else and not understanding what's going on. There are two types of patients. There are some patients who prefer to not to be too aware of everything that's going on. They're too stressed out. They're not comfortable with this. And they'd rather be, taken charge of rather than saying, I'd rather now be empowered and take care of my health and my life because it's my life which depends on this. And I want to be interactive. So that's why Joanie said, it's a partnership. We are partners, whether for the patients or for the people who take care of us. So thank you to all those who participated for the past 4 or 5 years now. As it was said in the small introduction, I'm now 80 years old because I heard patients who said, oh, well, at what age can you try to start your lifestyle? Well, you can start very early, but it can also start very late. And in my case, I consider that, as Mel said, it's just kind of a second life I've been given, but it's a far more enjoyable life than the one I had before, up to a certain point. Because I was overweight, I was diabetic, I had high blood pressure. I would go 5 or 6 times to the bathroom at night, which meant that I didn't sleep well. Well, now everything is better. I have a normal blood sugar and normal blood pressure. I no longer get up at night to go to the bathroom. So it's wonderful. Life is beautiful. So thank you all. Thank you for having spoken about your experiences in home dialysis. We have learned a lot, and I would now like to answer questions from our audience, the participants. And we have a few questions for Joanie on peritoneal dialysis. And I'll start with the first one.
Cycler PD be used interchangeably? And by that, I think that the person asking the question means, can you be on both therapies at the same time?
I think yes, but me sincerely, I know more about home hemodialysis, but I think Lisa mentioned it earlier on that there's no problem. Go from the cycler and then to go manual. Yes, if I can answer, yes, indeed. This gives you, I remember I had a marriage. One evening I knew that I would arrive late. So what I had done is I had done manual all day to avoid doing the cycler during night. So it's interchangeable as long as you have your 4 minimum exchanges per day, whether it's manual or with a cycler.
One for you. You talked a little bit about the opportunity to travel because you could have supplies shipped to where you were going. One of the questions from a participant is around the cycler's portability. So you talked about CAPD supplies being delivered, but in your experience, is the cycler portable? Would it run on a generator in a camper, for example?
I haven't done camping with peritoneal dialysis, but I've heard of people doing it, but I think they were doing manual at the time. So when I was leaving, I was bringing my cycler. I know it depends on the company, but you have to make sure you have the space in the car because you need a place for the boxes, the cycler. But I've heard of people who could transport it by plane, but before you go on a trip somewhere, you really need to communicate with the company, the medical company, because in certain countries they can actually deliver the cycler, but in others no. So sometimes we have to do manual. So you really need to talk with the experts before you plan any kind of a trip, so they can really guide you on how you should organize yourself at the destination. Yes, I wanted to add something as far as travel. Home dialysis, I've submitted a request to go to Vancouver for 10 days, and I asked Joanie, who suggested that I can go to Vancouver with the dialysis, and she said maybe it's possible, we'll see. I started to fill in the papers, and Joannie's taking care of all this and the reports and the different things we need, and send this to the Vancouver Center at the hospital there. So first of all, I gave the dates, and then they accepted me, and then they gave availabilities. I had to do dialysis every 2 days. So it was actually a 4-hour dialysis and not 8 hours. So you can you can travel from Montreal to Vancouver. Vancouver is actually quite far away in the west, right? But it's possible. I haven't asked to go abroad. I ask, can I go to Mexico with this? And they have not yet answered, but it's possible to, it is possible to travel. And if Mr. Lefort wants to go somewhere, to travel somewhere, I would say, ask Joanie. It's possible. I think it's possible. At the beginning, I thought it was not possible because we're stuck with this machine and we don't know what to do with it. So it was actually quite a pleasant experience. I could go to Vancouver, do dialysis there, and everything was well organized by the team. And to what's different is, well, I'm used to do dialysis 8, 9 hours during the night, depending. And when I went there for 10 days, do 4 hours, not 8, I'm a bit disbalanced. Maybe it's too fast, the water. So I had headaches and other things. So compared to the 8-hour dialysis, I think 8-hour dialysis is the best. So this is something I wanted to share. Thank you very much. A question that we receive from a lot of patients. Thank you for sharing your experiences about travel. Now I have a question for everyone, actually.
Led you to select the particular mode of dialysis that you're using? How did you decide on the therapy that you chose?
Start now. I didn't know what was dialysis, and they said start this home dialysis. I didn't know what it was. And the first person I saw was Joanie, and she came to see me in the room, and she says, "Hello, welcome to the team." I was okay. I didn't really have much choice, did I? Did not suggest that I do peritoneal or hospital. I thought, I said, okay, that's how I realized that I needed to take care of myself. Like Mr. Lafont was saying, if you don't take care of yourself, I followed what they were telling me. And in my case, it was not that complicated, actually. And I really followed all the instruction they gave me. And after 2, 3 months, we installed the machines and the stock and with the team, and how everything is going and functioning. And I adapted quite fast to the system. First week was difficult to sleep and find the position, and also the machine makes noises, not big noises, but still. So after 3 months of dialysis, I realized actually that this noise was putting me to sleep. I was actually falling asleep with this repeated, it's a repeated sound. And sometimes I can do 9, 10 hours dialysis until the concentrate is really finished. And then this is when I unplug myself. And sometimes I do 9 hours. So the results are really, really good with all the requests and also food. I'm not so restrained. Of course, I'm careful, but I'm not as I don't have that many restrictions as others. In my case, it was a good thing. Yes, in my case, I was followed by a nephrologist in pre-dialysis, meaning it was not a test that determined that all of a sudden my kidneys were failing. They ceased to function from 2005 to 2019 because I was followed by a very competent nephrologist, the Dr. Pichette at Maisonneuve-Rosemont. And to a certain extent, he had told me that we were going towards dialysis. So I started a pre-dialysis treatment and with the nutritionist as well in order to prepare myself to what dialysis would be. And this is when I had cancer with the chemo and radiotherapy. So creatinine went up very much, and I really needed to have dialysis then. And Dr. Pichette told me at the time, you're not obliged, but you would be a very good candidate in home hemodialysis with a fistule. Because we had talked about transplantation and peritoneal also. And still, since I had morbid obesity, he said, well, probably peritoneal wouldn't be for you. And then when we went to the transplant, I was almost 80 years old. So I understand very well that people who have received a transplantation, I understand that they do this for younger people because my life expectancy was not eternal, right? But I think I can continue this way for quite a while. But right now, I'm really satisfied. So I started home dialysis with a fistule, and I was also swimming. I was swimming 3 times a week. With the peritoneal, you cannot swim. You cannot go swimming. Why? With the fistula, I can at least swim, and that's good. So this is the answer to the question. Thank you very much, Lisa. Actually, in my case, I didn't have the option of doing home hemodialysis. If it was offered to me, I would clearly have considered it, but I didn't want to go 3 times a week to the hospital. So it was peritoneal dialysis that was more interesting for me. But to respond to what Mr. Lefort was saying, no, we have restrictions as far as swimming in peritoneal. We cannot swim, but in discussing with my nephrologist, we found that we can actually surround the catheter in a stomia, and I couldn't necessarily go to the public pools, but I could swim in another private pool. And the peritoneum can become really tired at some point with dialysis. We found this in my case, peritoneal dialysis was not as efficient, but fortunately, I had the transplant. Otherwise, I think maybe we would have had to look at another type of dialysis. Thank you very much, Lisa. So we're a little bit over our session. Joanie, is there something you would like to add to wrap up? I would like to add that before we used to prioritize peritoneal dialysis for renal function, and now more and more we give the choice to the patient instead of targeting patients for autonomous. Actually, we talk about the two of them, and we really discuss with the patient depending on their daily activities. I would like to really thank Joanie, Dimitra, Lisa, Normand, Sumitra, for their information and generosity in sharing their experiences. You've enriched my understanding of home therapies, and we are really grateful that you took this time today to share your expertise and to really train us and educate us.
We'll see you soon. Merci tout le monde.